Hi there, Mark Bunzel. Good evening, everyone at home. It's Peter Schrappen with Mark Bunzel here for Seattle Boat Show Live.
Hello, everybody.
There's the Landons. This is like clockwork. It's working too well. There's Landon. Yes, that's right. Hi, Leonard. How's it going?
Thank you.
Nice
Lorena's off busy doing another session right here, so you just get one Landon tonight.
Right on. Well, it's great to see you, Leonard, and great to see you, Mark. Welcome everyone at home. We've got a big show planned tonight, and I'm delighted to be here. I kind of flew in. I missed the pre-show call, so it might be a little bit more herky-jerky than normal.
No.
Not possible.
We got it all covered.
That's great.
We got it all set for you. So, Peter,
yeah,
did you jet in from Olympia?
No, I jetted in from so we've got a nice, I feel like I'm preaching the choir of this show, but right before this, it was 57 people at a community meeting trying to curb wake surfing in Snohomish County. So it was 57 against 1. It was a lot of unhappy, grumpy people talking about loud music and waves from boats. And so they wanted answers from the industry. And that was the role that I played for the last hour. So I want to reassure them that we actually don't represent the jerks either. And we are looking on ways we can work together around boater education, and boating safety is important to us. You know, the parts of our core values, Mark. So it was a chance for me to share the story, and hopefully, I know there will be other meetings, but yeah, they want to know how much money we had paid to the Snohomish County Commission to buy them off with our lobbying dollars. And I don't know if they realize just how small our PAC is, and we don't donate to them. So I felt good to say, actually, we've given them $0 ever. So that hopefully placated them a little bit. So that was, and then the hour before that, if I may, Mark, I attended Council Member Dave Upthegrove's kickoff. He's on the King County Council. You may remember that name.
Yes,
he was the prime sponsor. You don't forget a name like Upthegrove. It's a prepositional phrase all in one.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was our big champion in 2011 on the Copper Bottom Paint Bill, and now is at the King County Council. So he invited me to his campaign kickoff, and then from 4 to 5, I was sending in a letter to Governor Inslee to prioritize retail workers as they roll out the vaccine plan. So a lot of our workers are considered essential, but they're not considered a priority for vaccines, like the retail, like West Marine or Fisheries Supply. So we want to make sure they're part of Governor Inslee's plan moving forward. And then, and I also looked at Department of Revenue language around an amendment from 4 to 5 on this 1107 bill. 1107 bill I've been talking about for weeks now, Mark, that has to do with skipper chartered vacation. So it's been a fun, busy couple of hours.
You have been busy. Boy, I'm so glad. I say it every week, but I'm glad we have you working for us. How you memorize all these bills and all this trivia and the people behind them is just amazing. You're just a wealth of information.
I can remember that, Mark, but my wife, Emily, got me a book. It's Hard to Save the World When You Can't Find Your Keys. And unfortunately, this is a true story. Scouts Honor, I lost the book. So so that tells you how my mind works. I can remember some of this stuff, but no, it's some things just stick in my mind. And so yeah, I'm delighted to be here. And we got a big, how are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. I visited my boat today. I had a friend in town, and she was kind of curious what a cruising boat looks like. And so we went down to the boat, and it was a nice day, and ran into some great people down on the dock, and they had all kinds of questions. And what do you think they asked me? People who run into me on the dock, anywhere in town, in the supermarket, what's the first thing they say?
How incredible is it to work with Peter Schrappen?
No, unfortunately, that's not
I thought I'd try there, Leonard. I thought that was
nice try, Peter.
It's softball.
It's and Leonard gets the same question.
The Canadian border.
When is the border going to open? What do you think?
Yes.
And that occupies, I have to say, Leonard, for both of us, 2 hours a day with phone calls or emails, or how do I get through the border? What's the process going to be? And we don't have a lot of good answers. The Canadians are unfortunately behind the ball in terms of vaccinations and their allocation of vaccines, and they're working to catch up, but their case numbers are high. They still are concerned about the numbers in the US. And so we don't have any indication that the border is going to open at any time yet during the summer. We're a number of people are optimistic that it might open before the end of the summer, but we have no evidence that that may happen.
Yeah, I kind of fell into this issue yesterday, Mark. I was on a call with a national delegation, the U.S. Super Yacht Association, and their lobbyist in Alaska. And so it's interesting now. If you have a foreign flag and you're in Sitka, you actually have to clear customs in Mexico before you can come to Seattle. It's so convoluted right now because of the Jones Act. I know I can see your mind working right now, Mark. What does that exactly mean? So it is kind of confusing, but the only way for a Sitka foreign flag vessel to now make it to the U.S. is to have to go to Canada. That ain't happening. They're gonna have to go to Mexico to come back to Seattle. So that's not gonna happen either. So we're really concerned that we're gonna lose a lot of these larger vessels or any vessels with foreign flags due to the Jones Act. So it's an incredibly important issue.
And I assume the pilotage requirements are still in place for large super yachts going into Alaska.
They're in place. Well, I can speak more on the pilotage side on the Washington State. I mean, pilotage is in place for any vessel with a non-U.S. flag. So you actually have to go for an exemption for any non-U.S. flag, and those exemptions exist, but there's some paperwork and some money that's involved.
Yeah. Good.
Well, on that topic, there is a contingency that, there's a contingent of people that are working on legislation at the federal level to bypass, I don't know if it's the Jones Act, but so that the cruise ships can actually go into Alaska this year. They're trying to get a provision written in so that there's an exception right now to. And the article I saw said that it was an 1886 law, which I think is earlier than the Jones Act actually, and it had something to do with passenger vessels. But there's some they're pushing for some legislation to allow that to happen, so that Alaska really wants to, Southeast Alaska wants a cruise ship session or season this year. They quite missed the revenue from that, I believe. So is that the same? Is that what you were talking about, Peter?
No, but that what sounds promising. It would be nice to know how effective the Sitka Chamber of Commerce is, or the Alaska Chamber of Commerce. And I know Senator Murkowski is an incredibly important senator in the U.S. Senate, given her swing vote nature. So, yeah, it would be nice if that would be a bipartisan issue for sure.
Yeah, I was looking to see whether it was bipartisan, but it doesn't say that right here. So,
okay, I could look into that between now and.
Peter, as long as you mentioned the Washington State pilotage, that's for vessels over 65 feet, correct?
Well, again, it's for all vessels unless you have an exemption, and those exemptions only exist if your boat, you can only apply for an exemption if your vessel is under 200 feet and 1,300 gross tons.
Okay.
So if it's above that, sorry, Mark, I know that with your giga yacht, you don't have to worry about the exemption process, but
we had a foreign boater that did come in. There were foreign flagged. It was a German flagged boat, and they were adhering strictly to the rules, and they did get a pilotage exemption when they came into Puget Sound. I think he's one of the few that did. It was a 46-foot Nordhaven, and he got an exception for that. But he did note that you have to pay in U.S. currency when you apply for that. So he had a little bit of a problem getting all of the currency, and it wasn't. You couldn't do it online, basically. But I was surprised that he had.
Yeah, Bunzel be paying in Bitcoin, knowing you, Mark.
That's right. NFTs. That's
how you roll.
Yeah. Leonard, what else do we have for new announcements?
Well, you started on the COVID thing, which is again a hot topic. And this one came in an article I was reading. It's actually from Morgan Stanley, the brokerage firm. And it was on a number of other topics, but this paragraph caught my attention. It said, after a slow start, the vaccination rollout in the US has picked up nicely. New cases and hospitalizations are down 70%, leading some health experts to suggest we may achieve herd immunity as early as April. While I hate to jinx it, but could life in the U.S. be back to normal by Memorial Day? This article is suggesting. So that's a bright spot. Also, at the state of Washington, the state is considering changing the travel restrictions for residents that have been vaccinated. I won't go into all the details, but it's kind of a bright spot that says, hey, there's some optimistic stuff happening here. And then on the Canadian border front, there is a team. It is a bipartisan team that is working on getting some definition to how the U.S. and Canada border can be opened. And their hope is to get the border open. Well, I don't want to say hope. I want to say they're reaching a bit, but a hope was to get something open, some partial opening by Memorial Day, and then get a full opening by July 4th. And I think we talked about this last session. One of the things that was interesting was part of this bipartisan team includes Christine Gregoire, which of course is one of Washington past governor. So that was interesting to see. And again, a hopeful note there that apparently this bipartisan team is preparing to meet with Trudeau, and apparently Trudeau has said that the border will open sometime in the future. Well, yeah, we hope it'll open sometime in the future. The other part that was interesting on that was that the article was pointing out that this may not be the last time that the border closes. So it may open up and then it may have to close down again in the future. Again, this COVID thing might be recurring and coming back to us at some point in some form. And then I got one more. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Leonard, a quick question in the chat, and maybe Mark, you're going to talk about this a little bit too, though, is your trip from Washington State up to Alaska. Can you talk about that? And I think that's what people are also interested in, is leaving a non-Canadian port like Washington State and transiting to through Canada to a non-Canadian port like Alaska. That's a question that's in the chat. I'm wondering if you wanted to answer that now, Mark, or if you'd like to hold on to that.
Well, let me let Leonard finish, and I'll touch on it very quickly.
Great, thanks.
I had one other update. This is something that I reported in January, and has to do with the Montlake Bridge, the Montlake Cut, the bridge over there, and the maintenance that they're going to do on the cut. And I reported that in January, the original closures that WSDOT was planning. And then I know, Peter, you mentioned that based upon some comments that came back from boaters. I'm being careful with those words. Comments that came back from boaters about the planned outage in the middle of the summer. They have changed that, and WSDOT came back with their revised plan, which the Coast Guard is prepared to approve at this point, which I'm not sure it's a lot better. It's okay. I can do that, Leonard. It's a lot better because they're going to open just up one leaf, it's called, throughout the course of the summer and or throughout the course of the 27-day closure. So it's one that we're sitting pretty on. It's not going to impact boating really, and we've been at the table and okay.
Yeah,
well, I saw in August. Yes, August looks pretty good. But after August, after Labor Day, it looks like you're limited to the weekends to get through the cut at all. From what I can read.
Yeah, well, we've got a meeting on Monday, so stay tuned.
Okay.
But yeah, no, we're not going to agree to anything that's going to negatively impact boating. So
okay.
Yeah, we're in good. And the bridge administrator is someone who understands the importance of boating. I'll leave it at that.
Very good.
Good. All right, we'll put that on the schedule for next week.
Oh, actually, I won't be here, Mark, but maybe I'll send maybe Leonard can read the update.
Yeah, Peter and I are going to be off next week, and we've been working to find appropriate replacements for us to work with Peter, and so we found the right person, and that's Peter's boss.
That's right.
So George Harris is going to be stepping in. Leonard and Lorena are going to be traveling, and I'm going to be actually on a plane, and I'm off on assignment to report on boating in Florida. So I'll report in a week later and with some pictures and maybe some manatees. We'll see what we can come up with.
And I'll be boating in Hawaii a little bit, Mark. I'm going to see Jack Wilkin of Seattle Boatworks fame, and he's hosted me and my family down in Hawaii. So he's got a Boston whaler. Looking forward to boating's like in Hawaii.
Wow, that you take some pictures.
Yeah, can I expense that
pretty
trip, Mark?
good.
Can I put it on the Seattle Boat Show live account? Is that
I think you can, but what you said though is he's posting you, so it sounds like there's a little payola here. We're going to be listening to make sure there's not a special, message inserted in there, or you're not wearing a shirt that says, see Lake Union Boat Works. So
I'll have to ask the Grossbeck Realty Group, see if they would subsidize me.
that's true. That's true. We could check with Jane on that. I'll mention that
Got
to
the
her
sponsor
tomorrow.
in there. Did you see what I did, Leonard? I got the sponsor.
You did.
Yeah.
You did.
All right.
And no bell. You just worked right into that.
All right.
There
What's
it is.
else going? Do we have a guest tonight?
Well, yeah, we
but
do.
I was gonna put, Lorena and I will be here on the 1st. So a week from today, we will be here with George. So we're looking forward to that.
Okay, so your question about the border is pretty sensitive, and I'm really avoiding talking too much about this, because it's pretty speculative. And what we're talking about is there is on the Canadian Customs website information about a transit passage. And yes, I'm going to be trying to do the transit passage in May, where if you can show that you have a worthy trip that you're doing, and in our particular case, we are going to go on the most direct route, which is one of their requirements. We're going to do an 8-day passage, actually a 6 to 8 day passage through BC. I'm allowing 2 weather days, and we're not going to be stopping in any towns. We're going to anchor out every night. We'll have enough provisions on board. We'll stop for fuel 3 times. We'll indicate where we're stopping. We'll call ahead to make sure that fuel is available. And we're taking extra precautions. And so we're going to be going on that and giving that a try, and I'll be reporting on it afterwards. I'm very concerned by the number of calls that Leonard and I get daily. We joke about it a little bit, but it really is true, of the number of people that want to go on this transit passage. I'm concerned that the Canadian authorities are going to see this wave of Americans coming through and may actually change the process or be refusing people. And so the way things work is when you go to clear customs, and typically they will come to your boat, and in some locations it's been reported that it can take up to 3 hours for them to come to your boat, especially at Van Isle Marine or Sydney. And they'll then go through their whole process, including sometimes inspecting your boat. A question that frequently comes up: do they have the same limitations on liquor and tobacco and things like that? And yes, that hasn't changed. Those limitations are in place. And so they're looking for people who are recreating in British Columbia rather than truly doing a transit passage right on through. So we're going to be ready to show them with float plans and charts and so forth that we're going to be doing a straight through passage with all anchorages, and looking to be very careful with that. So excuse me, just chokes me up here. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I want to recognize Dave Dickerson. He's on the call tonight. He's in the audience. He's my colleague at the National Marine Manufacturers Association, Mark. So it's kind of like I've got to be on my best behavior. I got my mom watching. I've got Dave Dickerson watching. So I know that NMMA and NMMA Canada are working earnestly and feverishly to get the border reopened as well. So I wanted to recognize their leadership on this important issue.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We appreciate everybody that can put the word in on that. But I'm discouraging people from believing that the border is going to be open till, at best, it could be the tail end of the summer boating season. So we'll have to see. All right. So with that, I have one more little announcement. Many of you took advantage of the Admiral program at the Seattle Boat Show Connect end of January, and part of that package was a Wagner cruising guide. And we've had many people calling us wondering, where is their Wagner cruising guide? So I'm pleased to say the crew here at Wagner Guide World Headquarters shipped them all out. They are all, as the joke says, in the mail. And I'm going to ask, they're sent out at the book rated media mail. We know some of them, people have received them. And I would say if you have not gotten your book yet, give it a week just to see if it's caught within the mail. We've heard books appearing in West Seattle and Bainbridge Island, so they're getting out there. We shipped over, oh, thank you, John Rongren. He came in on the chat line. He received his yesterday. So if you haven't received it, please call us at the Wagner Guide, 360-299-8500, and we'll look to see to make sure yours was shipped. I'm sure it is. So we shipped out 982 books. It was quite a task to get that all set up and out the door, but they're gone. They're in the mail. And again, if you don't have it by next week, give us a call at our world headquarters here, and we'll make sure you get a book. And I even had somebody this morning when I walked in the office, he was walking in right behind me, and he said, "Hey, where's my book? I'm trying to plan my trip." So anyway, but thank you all for your support on that. It's been really terrific. Were you going to add something, Peter? You look like you're
no, I picture you walking around Anacortes and people just stopping you all the time. And they also picture you wearing those Groucho Marx glasses, trying to be in disguise.
Yes.
Does that work?
Trying to be in disguise. Yeah. But it's been nice. Some people call to thank us that they got their book and they love it. And we appreciate all kinds of suggestions and comments. Call Leonard if you have a suggestion. That's his department. I'm joking. You can talk to any of us of it, but it is part of the fun that people run into us all the time. And Leonard, we got some great feedback on Cypress Island, didn't we?
We did. There was a reader that emailed us in. They had some great things to comment. They had some great comments about our write-up on Cypress Island, and thank you to them. They gave us some other things to add to the next edition, and we really invite that. If you have some comments about places you visited and you like to share that with us, we welcome that. Email it to us.
I'll put you on the spot here, Mark. Do you think you'd add a section for geocaching?
We've had geocaching in the past, and I think that was about 3 years ago in the Wagner Guide.
Huh. Okay.
But we have covered it, and if enough people ask, we'll cover it again.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Let's get on with the show.
Well, I'm gonna turn it over to Leonard to introduce our guest tonight. A very popular topic, and our most popular topic we've had, I think.
Yeah, this is we were on this topic about 2 weeks ago, and that's getting internet on your boat. That seems to be a very popular topic. And tonight we welcome Steve Mitchell. Steve Mitchell has a website, CBITS. He's a consultant. He does electronic and electrical system design work on a consulting basis. He's with F5 Networks. He's been in the technology world since the 1990s, including fingerprint IDing and gaming and online ticket sales. He's an active boater, has had a number of boats, everything from 34 footers to 50 footers, power, sail, 15 years of working with boat electronics. He's the expert here. So we're going to hear a lot about that. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
So Steve, we had Doug Miller on, who had a wealth of information, and you've got some information from us. What's the next step beyond where Doug left us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know Doug covered a lot of great information on how to get internet on your boat, and tonight I'm going to talk a bit about how to work from your boat, which is a little bit more advanced than what Doug was talking about, and it's usually the primary reason people are looking for internet on their boat lately, because we all have them and we'd love to be out on them all the time, and working from them would make it even that much better, right? So that's what I'm going to cover a little bit tonight. Let's make sure that this is working. So High level agenda, I'm going to talk a bit about connectivity. Why is it hard to work remotely? Talk a little bit about cellular plans, which are hard to find, but the most important thing in the entire process. What you can choose from for boat internet and some recommendations behind that, and a little bit about cellular coverage on that front. So Leonard kind of introduced me and covered my background. I'm not going to go through this. On the right-hand side is something I was doing a little bit earlier this year. That's Susha. And I was sitting on a picnic table at Susha doing Zoom sessions and all sorts of wonderful things. So if you ever see a suspicious looking person with lots of antennas wandering around Susha with batteries in tow on things like that, then that would be me. But I have a background in networking and I love working on technology and in particular connectivity. So that's kind of been my passion for a long time, which is why I run around with all the antennas. So to kind of preface things, I know Doug talked a bit about this a couple of weeks ago, but I find this slide, and I've used it for a long time, really, really super helpful. When you're thinking about being out in your boat, the further away you are from land, the harder it is to get connected. And this really kind of illustrates that. On the far right, you can see in this particular example, a sailboat obviously docked. When you're docked or when you're anchored real close to something, Wi-Fi is your primary source of being able to get online, at least for most people. When you go a little further away, you can use a cellular signal. When you go even further away, you've got to use satellite. And the difference between all of those is quite dramatic. As you move to the left on this slide, it gets a lot more expensive and a lot less usable. But for tonight's purposes, I'm going to kind of focus on cellular and Wi-Fi and how that can be used, because most of us are coastal cruisers, right? We're going to stay somewhere within sight of land. Working out in the middle of an ocean in the middle of nowhere is possible nowadays, but is very, very expensive. And that's not necessarily primarily what most of us probably are focused on. So we're going to be focused primarily tonight on Wi-Fi and cellular, not satellite. But I have background in that as well, although I know you guys had some great sessions with folks I think it was about a month ago on some of the new up and coming satellite stuff as well. So why is working from your boat hard? What makes it hard about it? Usually it's reliability, the quality of your experience, right? So it's not as good. Things cut in and out. People get frustrated if you have to do a Zoom session like this and all of a sudden you're not moving or making strange noises or something like that. If people are using all sorts of different applications, right? I mean, most of us, if we're working in the corporate world, we have Microsoft Office, we've got Teams, we've got Google, we're using Zoom, we're using all sorts of things that if you're doing that from home makes sense, but when you're on your boat, it's a lot more difficult and it seems to stress things out. And then you might have a whole group of people that are somewhere else on the boat enjoying the view while you're working, and they're streaming Netflix, they're using Hulu, they're doing all sorts of things like that. And the more people you add, and the more devices you add, the more complicated it gets. So that's kind of the background for why it's hard. I'm sure most of the people who have questions about this have already experienced this, and is one of the reasons they might be interested in how you solve it. So I'm not going to go into great detail. This is one of the slides that I use when talking to people when we're talking about specifics. But the most important thing as to why it's hard is three reasons. It's the pipe or the bandwidth that you have on your boat. When you're at home, you probably have a Comcast connection or a CenturyLink connection, and they're huge. You can download things instantly. You can watch TV in 10 different rooms. You can do whatever you want, and it's usually not a problem. But on a boat, that's very limited. And when we call that bandwidth, and that's the amount of data that can get from one point to another in a certain amount of time. And if you're using Wi-Fi or cellular, those are always kind of a problem to get that much bandwidth. The one that usually comes up the most lately is latency, which is the second one here. And that's the time that it takes for something to happen on the internet. In particular, things like what we're doing tonight, a Zoom session or a phone call. If you have bad latency, or a very slow connection is what a lot of people will say, it's really frustrating for people. It's like talking to them on a CB radio or talking to them, really, really slowly, where you have to wait for them to stop talking, wait a whole few seconds, and then you'll start talking over each other. And those are particularly bad with satellite and cellular connections. And so that's kind of why it's hard. Reliability is a given, right? I mean, we're floating around at anchor. There's things passing by us. Somebody shuts, something off and it causes interference. So it's a little bit more difficult to deal with reliability on a boat than it is at home because you're moving. There's all sorts of different factors combined with that. So how do we solve these three things? There's a theme here. Multiple sources of internet. You want to have as many different types of connections as possible. So if you're in a marina like I am tonight, I'm connected to Wi-Fi and I'm connected to 3 different cellular providers all at the same time. You want high quality outdoor antennas and you want dedicated routers. And this whole entire presentation is focused on people who want to work remotely, right? This isn't the average person out pulling down a weather forecast once in a while and browsing email. This is for somebody who really, really has to be connected all the time and wants to work from their boat and then enjoy the anchorage at the end of the day, right? And go away from things. So there are definitely, middle grounds on a lot of this stuff. But if you are really looking to work remotely, and most of the people that I talk to nowadays are couples, they both have to work, they both have to be in Zoom calls, not all day long, but enough of them that it becomes a problem. This is how you solve it. Multiple sources of internet, high quality outdoor antennas, and dedicated routers. And we'll go into a few of examples of this as well. That's my boat on the left or on the right there with a few of the antennas that I have. The biggest problem that you have to start with any of this is finding a cellular plan. And I tell every customer that you need to start here first. You can buy all of the equipment that you want, but if you don't have a good cellular plan, it won't matter. And if you remember, one of the ways we're solving this is by having multiple cellular plans, right? Multiple connections. So it's really, really important to find a good cellular plan. And this is a big challenge. And you can go to my website and many other websites and see different ways of doing it. And it can be very, very frustrating to work with the carriers and get one. But this is the most important thing to start with. If you don't have multiple cellular plans, then it's going to be real hard for you to work from the boat reliably unless you're near a marina. So Doug covered a bunch of this. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but the primary ways of getting internet are through Wi-Fi and cellular that we're focused on tonight. One is using a Wi-Fi extender. They're fairly inexpensive. They get mounted outside. You can see one that I had on a sailboat there on the right-hand side with the clamps holding on to it there. They're relatively inexpensive, easy to set up, and they allow you to capture a Wi-Fi signal either in a marina or from someone's house or somewhere else. But they only work when you're close enough to that. And you have to be fairly close for that to work reliably. Wi-Fi in marinas is very, very flaky. I'm sure we've all experienced it, especially at marinas in the summer. Porto Friday Harbor and Cap Sante are some of my favorite places to visit, and they can be very, very unreliable as a result of the amount of people and the interference that's there. So that's one way to get some sort of connectivity, but cellular is really where most people focus their time. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. And I'm not going to talk about all this tonight. We don't have enough time to do that. But there's 4 ways: a hotspot device, cellular routers, and then boosters. What I'm going to focus on tonight is just cellular routers and domes. And that's really what, if you're working from your boat, is the best kind of technology to choose. This is what they look like. They have lots and lots of antennas on them. They're not inexpensive. They start anywhere from $600 and go up, but they are the best performing solutions. We'll look at an exact example with antennas and model numbers and things here in a second. But they're built to be mobile. They're built to run off of DC power. They have lots of cool features in them that can help you if you're working remotely. Doug from Miltech talked about a number of them as well. But both Peplink and Cradlepoint and other manufacturers make those. Domes are something that's new, that have been only out for a couple of years, and they simplify a lot of stuff, but they are a lot more expensive. Instead of having to have a lot of antennas, it's a single thing that you can mount outside. They're excellent for sailboats, so you don't have to run lots and lots of antenna cables. But the most important thing, and you saw it in one of the slides earlier, is antennas. You need high quality antennas if you're going to try to work from your boat, which is why I don't talk about hotspots or your phone as an option to be working remotely. Those don't work when you're far enough away from things, and they really don't work if you've got a couple of people and different things going on. So high quality antennas are very, very important in the right place and cabled correctly. So here are my recommendation. These are the keys to working from a boat. And to give you background, this last year, I was at anchor for 170 days and away from my home port for over 200. And I did my entire job, which was basically 7 to 8 hours a day worth of Zoom meetings and other things like that, using these tips. So it's a proven way to do it, especially if you're in Puget Sound in particular. So the first thing is redundancy. You need multiple cellular plans, and you need multiple cellular radios and a Wi-Fi extender. So it's about that multiple, right? If AT&T has a problem, having T-Mobile is perfect. If Verizon isn't working in this anchorage, having T-Mobile and AT&T get you out of that. So you don't have to move. You don't have to go back to a dock. You don't have to give up, or you don't have to race, your boat somewhere to make a critical meeting. The other piece to it is quality. You need a dedicated router. You can't do this with cheap stuff from Amazon. You can't do it with your phone. You need, quality equipment with outdoor antennas that have work features built into them. This is the most popular solution, and I'm pretty sure Doug talked about it as well, but this is a Peplink product. It's called a Max Transit Duo. It has 2 radios in it, 2 cellular radios in it. And the way that I see it sold the most is by having 4 outdoor antennas. 2 of them are for Wi-Fi and 2 of them are for cellular. You can add other pieces into it. The cost for this, for the equipment alone, is between $1,400 and $2,100. So it's an investment. But if you think about it, if that allows you to work remotely, to me, that's definitely worth it. I spend a lot more on boat-related things than that. And this would allow you to pretty much work anywhere within Puget Sound that your boat can be anchored or driven. The other thing that is really, really helpful for people who are working remotely and do a lot of things like Zoom stuff and Microsoft Office stuff and Teams things is some of these new features that came out as a result of the pandemic. And Peplink is the primary one that has come out with them. And this is called Speed Fusion, and it has revolutionized the ability to be on your boat. In fact, I'm using it tonight. And what it does is, if you look over there on the right-hand side of this slide, it is looking for particular types of activity. So it's looking for Microsoft Office 365 as an example, or Zoom. And it's actually taking those and sending those out multiple connections simultaneously. So if one of those connections fails, no one even notices. They don't see you stop or jerk or anything like that. Your email constantly flows, your Zoom sessions work, your video sessions work, phone calls always work. It's absolutely amazing. This has only been out for about 1.5 years. And it's completely allowed people who have to be in these sessions, who can't, say, well, I'm on a boat, please forgive me, hang on while I rotate through this beautiful background and you can all hate me. Which happens obviously, but from the perspective of remaining connected and being, part of that, that meeting or whatever is the critical piece, these features have really revolutionized things, and they're very inexpensive. They obviously come with some of this equipment that you've seen here, right? The Peplink sells that as part of the product, and it roughly costs about $30 every 6 months for this feature, which is, I don't know why they don't charge more for it. I probably shouldn't say that, but it's absolutely amazing. And it's made my life really, 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 my quality of life being able to do this remotely, just absolutely astounding. And everyone that I've worked with, there's probably 150 people I've worked with on this particular type of setup, it's changed their lives. They've been able to do things and go places that they normally would have had to only go on weekends, and then stay at marinas most of the time during the week. So these are the features and these are the pieces that you want to look for if you're really interested in working remotely. So with all of this, setup can be a little hard. This is kind of a niche area, right? So if you call your local electrician and say, I want a Peplink blah, 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 they're going to go, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that means. It's going to be folks like myself and Doug and other people where we can help the installation and help write up a a custom document of bill of materials and installation that would allow an electrician to do that. But it's a new area. This is all new technology. So you'll need to be a little bit patient. But make sure if you do buy something like this, that you do get training on it. It's extremely helpful to know that, so that when you're in a beautiful Anchorage like Desolation and you're having a problem and you can't make a phone call because you don't know how to use it, it's kind of a catch-22. You can't call somebody to get help on it. So it's important to get training. So we've covered some of the technologies, and let me know if there are questions that I can answer on the fly, or we can do that at the end as well.
I do have a question that came in
Sure.
on my text line, and that is, you've talked about 3G and 4G, but nothing about 5G. Can you cover 5G as you're talking?
Sure. So 4G, or LTE, as it's mostly called locally, is the primary connectivity that you want. 3G is way too slow. It's like sipping a milkshake down I don't know. Somebody can come up with something better.
Milkshakes.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm hungry.
Yeah.
It's very, very slow. 4G is what you want. 5G is a bit of a challenge, because 5G means about 3 different things. So a lot of carriers have rolled out what they call 5G. And I don't know if you've watched the news over the last couple of months and seen things online, but many of them have said, in order to get the best performance out of your new iPhone, you need to turn 5G off. And that is because it's not completely rolled out. And what they have rolled out is just more of 4G, but slightly faster. True 4G, it's technologies behind that typically are called wave. They are very, very short distance, and they're meant for metro areas like downtown Seattle. They will never work on a boat unless you happen to drive your boat into downtown Seattle, and then you have another issue most likely at that point. But so traditional 5G is not really going to probably be something that we will see in boating. You'll see kind of a hybrid 5G, and there are products out there for that. They're extremely expensive, and they're single radio, and I don't recommend any of them right now. Doug, I know, has some beta hardware in his hands, and it's something that we're excited to see become available, but it's really not ready for prime time yet.
And Steve, in addition to back over on the Wi-Fi, should I be at the 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz? And 2.4 gets a little crowded in a marina, doesn't it?
Yeah, if I flip back and make everyone sick by flipping through slides too fast. On the right-hand side of this diagram, this is the Port of Friday Harbor. I used to be involved with their Wi-Fi network there. And what that is it's showing, if you see those little lumps on that top, that's showing the 3 channels that are basically usable in 2.4 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz, based on the way that it works, goes further. But it's 20-year-old technology. If you remember back in the day when we had the handheld cordless phones and you turned the microwave on and the cordless phone stopped working, that's what's happening with this. There's only 3 frequencies that you really can use for that. So when you're in a marina, everything on board a boat has one of these radios, and everything else does. So if you ever look, there's probably several hundred Wi-Fi networks that are all crowding that, and there's only 3 channels for them. So if you're far away, 2.4 gigahertz might be your only choice. But if you're in a marina, 5 gigahertz is by far much, much better to use. But it's very short distance. So there are plenty of places up in the San Juans in particular where you can find 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi networks in anchorages. Those are good to use because there's not a lot of other people around you. I'll flip back to where we were here. So the other thing to consider when you're working remotely is cellular coverage. And this seems like a no-brainer, but there's a really good visual explanation that I have here that I think will be interesting to folks. Every provider has a map, and in the US, you have to go and look it up. In Canada, they actually have really great apps for your cell phone that you can download, and you can actually look at where the nearest towers are and the coverage and all that sort of stuff, and it's super nice. The US doesn't allow that for some reason, so you need to go to each individual provider and look at that, which can take some time. Or you can go to cellmapper.net, which is on the screen here, and you can look around at that as well. It's a little bit more techy, but you can kind of get an idea for the coverage. Keep in mind, if you find a tower on land, this is Desolation over on the right-hand side, carriers usually tune their towers to point inward into land. So just because there's a tower near you does not necessarily mean they've pointed it out. The best example that I have is one I use all the time. So this is the San Juans. We all love it up there. And this is what Verizon has for towers up there. So there's one up on the top of Mount Constitution, and then there's one over near Roche. And these are the techie versions of what the towers are doing and the IDs and bands. And if you're wanting to get into more of that, I have a lot of information on my site about how to find bands and which ones are best and all sorts of things like that. This is what AT&T looks like. So about the same, right? They have one up on Mount Constitution, one over in Roche, and then there's one over on Lummi as well. This is T-Mobile. They have a few more. So if you're going to go up to the islands, one of the best providers up there is T-Mobile by far for coverage. And they have invested a lot in this because of their local internet provider, Rock Island. They use this for last haul for a lot of people who live on the islands. But that doesn't mean that your boat can't use it as well, and it can. So this is a great way to go out and look at where you're going to go and spend time and see if you've got towers nearby that would be able to support you. And it's important, again, remember, we need more than one provider. It's important to look at two, right? So AT&T and T-Mobile would be great, or Verizon and T-Mobile. Verizon and AT&T wouldn't be as good as T-Mobile, obviously. I will only touch on this very shortly because we're not able to do much here with Canada, but the number one thing to remember when trying to work remotely, and in particular roaming in Canada, is roaming. You get charged a lot more for it, but both T-Mobile and AT&T have great plans for that. Or you can get a SIM card or a plan directly in Canada if you intend on being there a long time. Hopefully we'll be able to do this later this year, but I'm not going to go into great detail here.
Steve, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a real life question, Mark.
Go for it, Peter.
So Cometa was the cat's meow a few years ago. Are they still working on their flat panel antenna?
Well, so Amazon somehow bought parts of it, and there's discussions about different people doing stuff with it. I mean, obviously the one that everyone talks about is Starlink, right? So
I don't talk like that, Steve, but I will from now on. That's a new one for me. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of other solutions out there that are in the flat panel antenna world where they're phased antennas, where it's supposed to be super fast and super low latency. There are solutions from Iridium. The Iridium Certus is the one that I've seen the most. That's a much cheaper satellite solution that can help with some of that sort of stuff, but you're still getting into the $10,000-$20,000 price tag for the equipment, and then several hundred to several $1,000s a month. So Cometa was really promising, and it isn't right now. So maybe they'll come back, hopefully.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, great question. So the other location I always get asked about is Alaska. If you're going to try to work remotely in Alaska, I would probably say don't try. Or if you do, you need to try in places where you're going to be connected for a while and you're going to be disconnected for a while. After all, you're probably not there to go and sit in front of a glacier while you're on a Zoom call. I would probably suggest maybe enjoying the glacier and then moving somewhere else and doing your Zoom call. But coverage in Alaska, especially Southeast Alaska, is not great in many places. So if you need to stay connected, go with something like the Iridium Go or the Garmin InReach, or go full satellite if you need to. But you're not going to be able to do Zoom calls and things like that using those technologies. You'll end up needing to get near a populated area. And the best provider that we've seen up there for years has always been AT&T. People have had other success with other providers, but in general, AT&T has been the best up there.
Steve, I noticed over the last couple of years, the cruise ship routes seem to get more antennas and to have good cellular coverage wherever the cruise ships would go. Not just where they would dock, but where they would go.
Yeah, and we've had complaints too. Wherever cruise ships are, everything slows to a crawl as well because those towers and antennas can't keep up. So I guess this year, perhaps it won't be a problem, but for sure, yeah, they have been investing in technology along the way to support those folks, especially as they disembark on shore and need to do their Instagram selfies and everything. So from the summary perspective, just to kind of wrap it up, if you're trying to work remotely, you really want to focus on having multiple cellular providers and plans, multiple cellular radios, really good outdoor antennas, a marine quality router, and some sort of professional installer training. That router on the right-hand side is a 16 radio device that I'm testing that I would not recommend, but it is super powerful and interesting. And on that note, this is my setup that I have used this last year, which has got a few more antennas than my standard setup. I have 6 LTE radios that I can use all at the same time. And then I can also connect to Wi-Fi connections as well. And I also have a booster on board to help with that, and then some access points inside. And like I said earlier, I'm actually using a connection like that tonight. In fact, if I step out of here real quick, you can see this little section here. It's probably a little hard to see, but I'm using 2 cellular connections and an Xfinity Wi-Fi connection simultaneously to be part of the show tonight.
So Steve, when you say you're using multiple connections, is the router combining them?
Yes.
To give you multiple levels of bandwidth?
Yes, in this case, it's combining 2 cellular connections, so one from AT&T and one from T-Mobile, and it's combining also a Wi-Fi connection to Xfinity. And it's not giving me more bandwidth, it's giving me more reliability. So you can see what happened there just for a second. It probably went by very quickly, and it's also probably really hard to see, but where my mouse is here, it says 11 milliseconds. That's the Xfinity connection. You'll notice that one on the top goes up really high. So when that happens, it's not using that connection anymore, and it's kind of moving my Zoom session around, all 3 of those simultaneously on the fly. So if I happen to lose one of those, or the Xfinity connection got unplugged or something like that, nothing would happen. It's using all 3 of those simultaneously. That's that technology that's really, really helped people work remotely way more effectively than ever before.
Hey, Steve, back up to Southeast Alaska a little bit for a second. Which carriers actually have installations up there, or their own networks, as opposed to using someone else's? And does it make any difference?
Well, AT&T has the most, but they also have relationships with a lot of the local companies up there. I can't remember the one that's near Ketchikan. It's escaping me. But AT&T has the most relationships with the other local carriers that have stuff up there. I mean, all of the major carriers, all the major 3 will work when you're near larger towns, right? To an extent. It may only be like basic data services and text. You may not be able to stream stuff, but AT&T has the most relationships with the different local municipalities and the most of their own towers up there at this point. I don't think T-Mobile has ever expressed interest in investing up there that much. I do know that Verizon has, but AT&T is clearly the leader right now.
Mark, should we go through rapid fire the questions in the chat?
Sure, go right ahead, Peter.
Okay, so how does the dome, I guess we're looking at a little bit of rapid fire here, but how does the dome antenna fit with your 5 antenna example?
So I have, in that diagram, I had a very big central router. So that central router controls the domes, and it also itself has cellular connections in it. So we kind of went through that really quickly about the domes. They're more expensive, but they do require an additional piece of equipment. So for a dome installation, you could be into $3,000 or $4,000 easily, versus a single router installation, the PepLink that we looked at, where it was, around $1,500, including antennas.
Okay.
So related to that, does the PepLink have 5G radios in it?
So there is a new 5G set of gear from PepLink that it's not, I don't think you can buy it quite yet. Some of us are testing it, but right now they're only single radio. There are a couple double radio versions, but they're multiple thousands of dollars. So we're hoping that they will come out with the same dual radio solution that's around $1,000 within the next year or so.
Question came up, which would probably be nice to know. Steve, do you install these systems? And if not you, who might?
I used to, but I get stuck. I'm kind of a big guy. I get stuck in little tiny places, and I've been stuck too many times. So I usually end up doing the designs and work with, in particular locally, work with electricians and people who are more flexible than me to do the installs. So I don't do installs so much anymore unless they're very, very simple.
And Steve, we've got a question here. What about cell boosters? I assume that's for being able to do cell phone calls and text.
Yeah, most cell phone providers, all the big three, do Wi-Fi calling now. So if you have a good router on board instead of a booster, if you have a good router on board, like we've talked about, you can still make and receive calls and send and receive texts through that connection. But if you want a booster just so that you can have it for your cell phone and you don't want a router, there's really only two companies out there that make good ones, Cellfi and WeBoost. They're a little bit more simplistic. They're cheaper to install. They're only $500 or $600, but they have limitations. Anytime you're near anywhere that has decent coverage, they actually do more harm than good. And they really only work with a cell phone. You can pair them with a router if you want to, but you're getting into a complicated system at that point.
So speaking of complicated, Paul asks, how does the dome antenna fit in with your 5 antenna example?
I think we covered that one. Yeah.
Paul's got another good question. Paul,
okay.
Paul's another good question from Paul here is, do you burn data on all networks simultaneously? For example, a 10 gigabyte per month plan on 2 cell providers?
So that's part of that feature that I showed you. There was a slide I had that showed the different applications, and it said Zoom, Office 365, and those sorts of things. So for those specific things, like tonight here, when I'm doing this webinar with Zoom, it's burning double the data. Or if I was connected to 3 cellular providers, it would be burning 3 times the data, or the same amount of data with each of those providers. So you only want to use it for things that matter. So if somebody else is streaming Netflix or doing something on Instagram, then you wouldn't necessarily turn that on for those folks, just for the things that are important. So yeah, that's a very, very good point.
What's your hot take on Shakespeare Halo boosters? Does it make a difference in reception?
No, I mean, they're in the same camp as like WeBoost. They're fine. They're not going to give you what you can get with multiple antennas and multiple cellular radios. But if you want something just to boost a signal, then they're fine.
Okay. Training from who and what cost? Blaine's asking about training, and you might have mentioned training.
Yeah, so I do training a lot remotely. So PepLink products in particular have a way that I can connect into them remotely if you allow me to, and I can take you through it and do Zoom sessions. And I do training all the time for folks. PepLink offers online training, and there are a number of other vendors online too that offer it as well to help with that.
Okay.
So another question that's come up from Lothar. Once one has an installation like Steve is suggesting, how can you manage all that connectivity? The screen interface or app, and I think you showed this, provides a user interface to it, but does it do it automatically, manually, or and what's the best?
Yeah, so I'll share my screen again. This is my main router. So I've got my connections here, and if I want a different cellular connection, I can just drag it around, move them in different places. I can pick the providers I want to be used for one or the other. There's plenty of screens to get lost in here. If you really want to go into the advanced section, you can get confused. But one of the things that people like about PepWave in particular is this dashboard. I can see I'm connected. And if I'm not, then I can move things around and do what I need to do. There's a mobile app version, and the newer routers, if you've upgraded the firmware, you can manage from your phone as well. But most people, once they get it set up and they have the different connections, provided that you do it correctly, they don't really have to do very much in there unless you're switching a SIM card or something like that.
So Steve, on this screen, it shows that you're connected to Xfinity Wi-Fi. And I find that a lot of people don't realize that Xfinity has a Wi-Fi signal all over the place in the communities they serve. And then in Canada, Shaw has Wi-Fi in the communities, which I borrow a friend's. They've set me up with on their Shaw account.
Right.
So that when I'm in Canada, it's not costing them anything additional.
Right.
But I get fantastic Wi-Fi when I go to some of these Canadian towns when the borders open.
Right.
But can you comment about that?
Yeah, so Xfinity, if you have an Xfinity router from them, by default, it is actually broadcasting a little Wi-Fi signal called Xfinity Wi-Fi. And in fact, somebody asked in the chat where I'm at. I'm actually in Elliott Bay Marina right now. And somebody near me, I don't know who it is, has a Comcast router or an Xfinity router. And I'm connected to it. And that's totally legal. I have Comcast at home. So when I connect to it, it asks me for my username and password at once every 6 months or so. I mean, it hardly ever asks me. And so, I mean, it's free. They do slow you down. So you can't have, a million people on it because you're using someone else's router, but it's still fantastic and it's free. Yeah, I mean, in Canada, Shaw is a great example as well. If you happen to know somebody who has a password, that's a great alternative.
That's fantastic. And that's my little 2 cents of advice, is to find the nearest not cellular, but cable company connection. They seem to be pumping a lot of bandwidth into these communities.
Especially marinas. They've been going after marinas in the last few years. Elliott Bay, it's really, really inexpensive to do that here.
Yeah, good advice. Any last minute tips with this? And
I think the number one thing I come across is folks are very hesitant to spend money here, yet they'll spend $50,000 on a bow thruster. If you want to work from your boat and your bow thruster is as important to docking as working from boat is, then spend the right amount of money and work with the right folks to do it. You can spend a couple $1,000s and have an absolutely wonderful, wonderful experience, and then spend the rest of your time enjoying your boat and enjoying the anchorage that you're in.
fantastic advice.
That's compelling. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So Leonard, we're going to be in your hands next week, but before we do, what do we say we give a salute to the Groesbeck Realty Group, Mark?
Well, we always appreciate Groesbeck Realty Group for sponsoring this show, and they have listings of waterfront property in Anacortes and the Anacortes area, as well as docks for sale. Sometimes if you don't see the listing of what you want, give them a call. Sometimes there's deals that are coming up on the market, and they may not be published as a listing yet, or they can be on the lookout. So give Jean and her staff a call, and they can help you out. So we appreciate their support.
Amen. I put their website in the chat. So Leonard, what do you got dialed up for next Thursday?
Well, thank you for asking. I was just hoping you were going to do that. So next week, we're going to have a gentleman from West Coast Tank, and he's going to be talking about fuel polishing, cleaning your fuel tank. We suspect, and by the way, that not just suspect, we have some evidence from other people, not evidence, but some discussion from other people, that there are a number of boats out there that haven't been used in the recent past, that they may have been sitting over the 2020 season. People might be getting out, getting ready for that. And what are you going to do about all that old fuel that's sitting in your boat, in the tanks that have been in there for a while? So what about those Raycor filters that you looked at last time and there was something in there, but can't figure out what the heck that is that's in there? So that's what we're going to have next week. Again, that's going to be with West Coast Tank is going to be with us. And then the week after that, we're going to go visually, we're going to go, and vicariously, we're going to go up to Canada to the Rideau Canal. And we'll have somebody from Les Boat is going to be on with us, and they're going to describe the Rideau Canal. So hopefully when the border opens, we can do that. And of course, the people that are on that side of the border already can go up there. So that's the schedule coming up.
Very good. Well, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Easter, happy Passover. Episode 40, Mark, is in the books.
It is
One for the ages.
I guess we can announce. We'll do a more formal announcement, but we had some internal meetings, and we've been renewed.
Oh, they're picking us back up.
We're on for another year.
Right on. 2.0.
So, we've got to keep our numbers going up. So
Okay.
everybody tell your friends to tune in on Thursday nights. But we've had some spectacular nights with a lot of viewers. And a reminder that all of our past shows are available online on the Seattle Boat Show website. And you can go back and watch some of these topics again if you missed something. And they're all listed there with a description of them.
Excellent. Yeah, and everyone's got more than one computer or laptop or smartphone. So if you've got a bunch of those laying around, log in on all those different machines and help us really with our numbers.
Thanks, Peter.
Yes,
I think
that
that's
matters.
getting the system.
That
but
matters.
You must be in politics.
No comment. Well, episode 40 was a gentleman named person named Broderick Crawford hosted Saturday Night Live. That wasn't a name that I knew, but the musical guest was Dr. John.
Wow.
You know Dr. John's music?
Yeah.
Pride of New Orleans. He passed away in 2019, and he's got this song I heard on Halloween called "I Walk on Gilded Splinters." And the Halloween music, it's the same Monster Mash. You see it here, but this is a nice, creepy kind of song. I'm going to put it in the chat here, and I'd encourage people to check it out if they want to hear something different, a little bit of full moon type kind of music. So definitely don't be a stranger to Dr. John, and I'm going to wish everyone a very good night.
Very good, Peter. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
That's right. Hang in there, Leonard. You'll do fine.
Yeah, Leonard, you'll
Excellent.
be great.
Thank you.
All right,
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night. Thank you, Steve. Have a good evening.